Today on Riffs, Beards, and Gear, we check out the all-new Claro EQ plugin from Sonnox. Throughout my years of doing this YouTube channel and learning and growing as kind of an audio engineer mix guy, Sonnox plugins have been there for, the last 5 or 6 years for me personally. I am a huge fan of Sonnox plugins, and they recently came out with a new EQ that I thought was very interesting called the Claro. Now, before we go any further, this is a sponsored video as Sonnox have asked me to show you guys this new plugin. However, all thoughts and opinions are mine. In the plugin world, you have, in my mind, 2 different types of EQs. You have the ultra transparent, super mega clean EQ plugins, and then you have the emulators of hardware, SSL consoles, Neves, Pultecs, things like that. Well, the Claro has the transparency of the super precise EQs with some of the EQ curves found in the hardware realm. But ultimately, the Claro is about helping you and adapt to whatever production process you're using. Now, recently, I did a mix for Submission Audio's Grove-based MIDI bass plugin, and I happen to use Claro all over that mix. Now, for a refresher, the mix sounds like this. So a huge component of that mix is the Claro EQ from Sonnox. So when you open up Claro, you get this view. Now, initially you think, that's it? That's all there is? No. Nay, I say. So up at the top, next to the title of the plugin, we have Produce, Tweak, and Mix. Now, these are various views and various tools to help you either zoom in or zoom out to your mix, if that makes sense. So Produce is a more broad brushstroke, big move kind of interface. But then we go over to Tweak and we have our familiar looking EQ. This is where we can have an infinite amount of points to do all sorts of things if we want to. I'm gonna go ahead and click off of that. This is my bass EQ, for example. And then we have mix mode, which we will get to in just a second, but this is where we can globally see all of the instances of Claro and compare them sonically and visually to our instance that we have open. We can pick and choose what we want to compare and see to each other. It's pretty cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the Produce mode. I am still on my bass guitar track, and this area up here where it says rumble, weight, warmth, mud, definition, and harshness, and air, it's gonna give me a little readout, and it's gonna give me a kind of visual indicator of what sonically is going on. So let's go ahead and solo my bass track, and I'm gonna play this and kind of poke around with Claro. Okay, so what are we even seeing here? So if I mouse over the low, mid, and high controls, obviously in the middle, I can drag these and turn these up or down. I am adding gain to a specified bandwidth. Now we have quick buttons up at the top. In this case, we have 20, 40, 70, 100, and 150 Hertz, which corresponds with what's up here in the window. So if I click these buttons, it moves, but I don't have to choose just those values. I can drag to make them whatever I want. Okay, so same goes for the mid-range, same goes for the high end as well. Now, if I want to jump back to one of the predetermined tabs, I just click it. So these words, definition, harshness, warmth, and mud, are meant for maybe a non-pro to kind of give them an idea of what they're actually kind of listening for, if that makes sense. Now we also have these shelf buttons, which we can engage. Now by default, they are disengaged, but I also want to note that the auto gain feature is a very handy feature. So if this is on, it's going to volume compensate, plus or minus, depending on the moves that we're making. Now, normally without auto gain, if we're going to turn down a bunch of low end, the perceived volume may go down because a lack of energy in the low end if we turn it down. But this way, everything remains constant and in control. So now let's go into tweak mode. Now, tweak mode is where most of us that have used an EQ plugin feel most at home. And this is where I spend a lot of my time in Claro. Now, on the bass track in particular, you're going to notice some columns lighting up as I mouse over and hold my mouse over some of these EQ points. What this is telling me is I have some resonances that are happening. Now, I can choose to not do anything about them, or I can choose to do something about them. I'm going to turn some of these points off and let you see what I was seeing and hearing and why I notched where I notched with respect to the bass track. Hearing a lot of resonances and stuff like that, which is why I was making the moves that I was doing, but you can visually see what's happening with the glowing of the columns, as I like to call them. One more time. So this allows for a very, very defined visual aid for when you're kind of looking for maybe some harsh frequencies that are poking out in the mix or something like that. Now, I want to emphasize that you don't have to necessarily notch everything of where the columns are, but this is just simply a general guide. Now let's get out of the bass track and let's go ahead and go to the guitar track. Now, I think this is going to be more prevalent as far as the notching and what the frequencies are doing. So let's go ahead and play the guitar track and let you hear what's going on there. I'm actually gonna bypass Claro and then bring it back a couple of different times. So you can hear I'm taking out a bunch of, I'm notching a couple of frequencies. I'm also kind of cutting off the lowest lows and the highest highs. I'm tightening up the guitars, but I did start with a really great guitar tone. However, if I go over to produce, I can also tweak this further. Now, any moves I make in here in the produce window are going to be added to the tweak window. You will visually see some EQ. Let me give you an example. So this way, the moves that you're making are all basically getting collected in the tweak window, if that makes sense. The produce is just a simpler way, a zoomed out way to make EQ moves, as opposed to something much more in-depth and intense and particular in the tweak window. So now let's go back to my bass guitar track, and I'm gonna go into the mix window because I wanna know how my bass guitar is interacting with my kick drum, for instance. So I have my top window up here. This is my Grove bass, this is my bass track. And down here, it has my outsides, my 2-bus. But I wanna know how it's doing with my kick. Now I have an instance of Claro on my kick drum. I don't have any EQ moves going on the kick drum, but I have the instance of Claro, so I can use this view to see how they're interacting. Let's go ahead and see what these are doing. I'm pretty clean here. I think it sounds good, which is ultimately, what I judge by. I don't hear any phasey issues or anything like that. So the last use of Claro I'm going to show you guys is on the 2-bus for final tweaking. So I have an instance of Claro up here and I have some EQ moves. Now, if I went over to the tweak mode, here's what those EQs visually look like. Here's what I'm doing. I'm adding a little bit of highs, taking out some mid-range and not doing anything in the low end. I'm gonna come back over to the produce window and I'm gonna bypass this and I'll let you hear what's happening. I have some mid-range honk going on my overall mix. And if I wanna just take care of that real quick, I'm gonna do that right here. So I'm gonna start with this bypassed and then turn it on. Now, another thing that I did is I switched over from the tone to the width. And I believe, I narrowed the low end down just a little bit. This is also reflected in the tweak window as well. I'm narrowing down the low end just a little bit to give it some dimension. And if I wanted to go a little nuts, I could widen the top end a little bit too. Let's try that. And there you go. That is the new Claro EQ from Sonnox. Now the Claro, I think, is good for all levels, pros or non-pros alike. This kind of, I'm not gonna say has training wheels or hold your hand, but the book has pictures and I enjoy that. And I found that very helpful if I was wondering, what exactly am I hearing when I'm looking at something like the bass guitar and the kick drum relationship. I will link down below in the description if you would like to know more about the Claro EQ from Sonnox. And with that, you've been wonderful. I've been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. If you liked the video you just watched, please consider subscribing. And if you want to further support me and what I do, consider using some of the affiliate links down below in the description of this video. Go on over to Sweetwater, buy yourself something, and help me out at the same time. It's a win-win for both of us.